The After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray LeMaitre.
Welcome to The After Show on Telecom TV. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and we are broadcasting live and waiting to hear from you, our audience, at the end of Day 4 of the DSP Leaders World Forum 2021. We have a terrific lineup of guests joining us again today, primed and ready to answer your questions. Now, we've already received some, but please keep them coming using the form on the website below this video. Time to introduce my co-host for the After Show, Ray LeMaitre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV. Hello, Ray. Now, today's theme has been 5G and sustainability. What have been the highlights for you?
Well, the topic of sustainability and particularly energy consumption is really hot right now. All of the operators are focused on cutting their energy consumption levels for economic, environmental and strategic reasons. And we've had two great roundtable discussions on this and surrounding topics. One on digital services for decarbonisation and one on maximising efficiency in the rollout of 5G systems. And I know we're going to be delving deeper into these topics in this show. So without any delay, back over to you, Mr. Daniels.
Thank you, Ray, and we certainly will be. And joining us live on the programme today to discuss these issues are Jane Rygaard, who is Head of Dedicated Wireless Networks and Edge Clouds at Nokia, Miguel Caramas, who is Director of Network and Technology Planning for Verizon, Jose Antonio Aranda, who is Innovation and Product Strategy Director at Cellnex, Susan James, Senior Director Telecommunications Strategy with Red Hat, and Paul Miller, Chief Technology Officer for Wind River. Hello everyone, very good to see you all again. Now, lots of audience questions to get through in the next 45 minutes or so. Ray, over to you to get things started.
Great, thanks very much, Guy. So Jane, we're going to start with you. And before we get into the audience questions, a quick question for you, and we're going to be asking this of all of our guests. What got you into telecoms? How did you start your career in this industry?
Oh, Ray, I think the short story is a good dinner and the realization around the table of who were available to actually log in as root on a Unix platform. And when I put my hand up, I was in the pool of, I think you're qualified to be part of running, at that time, IN networks in the telecom side. So long time ago, but good dinner and being able to log in as root. It always works.
Absolutely. You put your hand up and that was it. That was the start of your career. Excellent.
Exactly.
Okay, so the first audience question we have today, and I'm going to position this one for you, Jane. Where is the most energy consumed in a 5G network? Is it in the network itself or in the radio components? And where is the biggest focus area in terms of energy reduction efforts?
So overall, if we take the 5G network as a total, 20% of the energy is consumed in the core network and the other parts, and 80% out on the radio. So if we want to do anything on the sustainability part and really look at energy efficiency, we need to focus on radio. And then within radio again, there is some physics for the RF side that we can work with, but how do we really squeeze out of making sure we make the right choices on the technology side between the RF and the baseband and being able to reuse this. I guess we can discuss in length on massive MIMO and the opportunities, what it brings and to be more efficient. And then also purely saying, how can we switch the radio off when we're not using it, right? We had it on the panel earlier that we discussed on using traffic patterns for also modernizing this. But the focus absolutely has to be on the radio side when it comes to the energy efficiency.
Okay, excellent. Well, that is a massive portion of the energy there out at the radio access. Does anybody else want to come in on this question, or shall we move straight on ahead? Looks like we're going to move. Jose, yes.
No, I would just add to what it has been mentioned that the reality of the energy consumption is that it takes from 20 to 40% of the OPEX from the mobile operators. So all the mobile operators and together with the infrastructure provider, we are trying to find ways to minimize the consumption, and we recognize, as it was mentioned, that the radio access networks is the one that takes more part of that consumption, and the optimization of that radio access network is key for the saving of energy consumption.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, cutting down on the power usage leads to lower costs as well, and of course this is all absolutely vital for the operators. Okay, Guy, I think we're going to head on now to audience question number 2. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Miguel, how about you? Let me ask you, what got you into telecoms? How did you get your start in this industry?
It's a great question. So it was a matter of choosing between two passions when I was in high school, and there was journalism on one side and it was engineering on the other. And well, it sounds like maybe we need to talk about an opportunity here with TelecomTV, but I decided to go for engineering, telecom school, and the rest is history.
There's always a job for you here. No problems at all. We'll take you with open arms. Let me get into our next viewer question then, because I think we should start this one with you and your expertise here. And the question is millimeter wave cellular more energy hungry than current frequencies? And if so, this would be counter to claims that 5G will lower the energy requirements for network operations.
It's a good question, and it's going to be, I guess the answer to the question is going to evolve over time. So if you were to compare on the energy consumption per gigabyte of data offered to the user, I think the answer is not significantly higher or different than past technologies. And then if you factor in some of the benefits, and as it was mentioned before, massive MIMO, beamforming, I think we have an opportunity to improve even more. So I think obviously the expectations as far as the service that we're delivering to the customer drives a lot of the consumption today, right? And we are also in the early days of the technology. But if we were to benchmark on a comparable metric, right? So milliwatts or watts per gigabyte delivered, I don't know that we can say that is significantly different than past technologies.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. As you say, we are early days on 5G millimeter wave usage. Any of our other guests want to add or contribute to this particular question? Otherwise, Jane, please.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that of course, from a millimeter point of view, that we would have a lot more access points. But if we are smart on how we design every single one of them, we should be able to not cause extra trouble by using many more, right? And this is, I think, as said earlier, this is part of the technology changes we need to have. We need to be very conscious about how we address the growth for the data with the right solution, so it becomes a mix of the different opportunities.
Yeah, good points. Thank you very much, Jane. Well, unless anybody else wants to jump in on this one, then Ray, how about we go and take our third audience question?
Absolutely. Okay, and this one is going to go to Jose, but like with our other guests, I'm going to ask you, Jose, what got you into the telecom sector? How did you start in this industry?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I studied electronic engineering, and I specialized myself in robotics. And in fact, I studied in Spain, and what I tried is to move around Europe to work in different areas. And I worked in Austria. I worked in the Cybernetic and Artificial Intelligence Institute in Košice, that is in Slovakia. But suddenly, I was called by Airtel that it is currently Vodafone, and they told me, listen, we would like to have an expert on security to join us. And I said, I don't have any clue about telco world. And they said, that's fine, because what we need is someone who know about algorithms, about security, and also speak a little bit of English and represent the company in the GSMA and 3GPP. And I say, yeah, it sounded attractive because it was when we just had one mobile operator in the country. And this was the second one, and I thought, well, it is a brand new mobile operators. It's exciting, and I just decided to join.
Okay, great, excellent. So, I mean, that sounds like a really interesting way to start in the industry. And now you're at Cellnex working with a lot of the mobile operators. So this question, and this is a question where we're hearing more and more these days, and I know it's something that you've been looking at from the panel earlier. What can be done to reduce the total energy consumption for 5G network operators? Is it possible to offer an increasing volume of mobile broadband services, but also reduce the telecom industry's carbon footprint?
Very good question. And I will just continue on the arguments that Miguel raised before. The reality is that if you compare, for instance, a 4G antenna with a 5G antenna consuming the same power, you will realize that for the same power, a 4G antenna can deliver around 300 megabits per second, while the same consumption in a 5G antenna could deliver 15 gigabytes per second. So that means that in terms of consumption and efficiency, 5G is around 50 times more efficient. And even if we look at technology themselves, you see that 3G was very power consumption not efficient, and we reduced the consumption enormously in 4G. But we have done even better now in 5G, and the consumption is 3 times lower in 5G than in 4G. And concerning specifically the things that you can do, yes, basically what the mobile operators are doing, and we are working with them, is investing in 2 things. One is renewable energies, and the other aspect to reduce is share, having the possibility of sharing capabilities, sharing infrastructure. And concerning renewable energies, the expectations is that in the next 10 years, the mobile operators will use more and more wind turbines. Approximately, the expectation is that they will have 40% of their sites with wind turbines, and using photovoltaics, solar panels in around 80% of their sites. So as we see that there's a more demand of broadband in different areas, you see that the mobile operators will have to provide that broadband in areas where you don't have currently even energy. And we have different projects with different mobile operators where we are investing in an auto-sustainable site where we can generate with those 2 energies, solar panels and wind turbines, enough energy to maintain the tower, and therefore reduce the consumption to zero. Not reduce the consumption to zero, reduce the power need from external sources to zero. And I think that's the future of 5G, and mainly in those areas where currently the mobile operator will need to cover with 5G and they don't have currently power nearby.
Okay, yes, interesting. And of course, we're hearing more and more announcements about renewable energy deals from the operators month by month. Jane, you wanted to come in on this one as well.
Yeah, I was going to say on top of this, if you think for the full life cycle of this network part, just by going to green energy, as said before, we're above 90% reduction on the carbon footprint. Of course, not on the energy consumption, but on the carbon footprint. So I think that's one thing. And then, as we also discussed in the panel earlier, this idea is about what can we then get, what they call a handprint, right? Where can we do the other way around? So can we use things like liquid cooling and get the water out and actually use that in a positive solution on the other side? So I think that there's renewable energy definitely on a big part, and then being able to utilize the heat of which we have from these installations as well. I think that's a very key part as well.
Yeah, and I think there's some good examples of those kind of models coming out of the more northernmost countries, out of Iceland and Greenland and places like that. Does anybody else want to come in on this kind of a broader picture, or should we move on? Yes, sorry, Miguel.
Yeah, so the only thing that I would add is and I realize that we're focusing a lot on the radio because of the high opportunity, but even if we talk about the networking side of the data center itself, there is a lot of technology solutions that we are looking at, and I know other MNOs are as well. Right? A lot of energy goes into cooling the data center, for example. So there are new technologies being considered, it's using water instead of just air and so on. So there is a big potential there. And then I think also the move, and I think you guys might have talked a little bit earlier today, but the move to software on the radio as well, right? And kind of going through the same journey that we've done on the core side towards virtualized RAN and then eventually Open RAN, and now opens the flexibility to treat the RAN as another application, and then have this same level of flexibility where now you can even on the compute side, power things down or lower the power consumption based on the actual traffic utilization and use those resources for something else. I think the move to software is going to be very important as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Miguel. So I think at this point, Guy, we will move back to you for the next question from the audience.
Okay, thank you, Ray. And a reminder to our viewers, please keep the questions coming. We'll get through as many of them as we can. Susan, let's ask you, what got you into telecoms? How did you get your start in this industry?
So I got started fresh out of university. I came out in the middle of a recession in Australia, and I went to visit my sister. And I don't know if you've been to Brisbane, but it's very hot and steamy in Brisbane. And as we were driving around, she said, "That building looks like it has air conditioning." So that was actually the Ericsson building in Brisbane. And I went in there and asked about a job. And I got a job as a receptionist at the Brisbane office of Ericsson, which was the enterprise at the time. And then I started my journey in Ericsson, which took me then back to Melbourne, which was the headquarters in Australia, and eventually to Sweden, to where I am today at Red Hat, looking at the whole industry. So it's been quite a journey.
Fantastic, and all because of some air conditioning. That's amazing. Right, look, next viewer question, because we're getting a lot of viewer questions in. And Susan, let me ask you this one first. As service providers become more cloud-oriented in terms of service creation and delivery, can this help with their sustainability goals?
I think absolutely. I think we just sort of touched on that a little bit in the previous sort of question. Having that flexibility to move the workloads around the network, it means that you can move them to the most appropriate point to do the processing, if you like. So you're not having to, say, drag workloads all the way back to a centralized data center to do the processing if you need to do that at the edge. You can consume a lot less resources in doing that. Inherently, containerized workloads actually use less resources. You don't have as much of the software stack that you need to be able to use that. And I think, we touched on it as well, having the ability to tune down the hardware resources that you don't need to use, all of that is enabled through software. So I think flexibility in your software stacks and having the ability to perform the task where it's most appropriate is really key in reducing that consumption, but also utilizing, as we said, the sustainable resources and all of those sorts of technology advancements become really key in creating sustainability and reusable energy. I think is where we agree the focus needs to be.
Thank you, Susan. And Paul, you'd like to come in on this point as well.
Yeah, thanks. And certainly I agree with everything that Susan said. And we've also seen, in service creation and delivery terms, the introduction of advanced orchestration capabilities as well. When you look at bringing cloud technology and technologies like vRAN that Miguel mentioned you've got the ability to completely automate this domain, right? And it used to take a tremendous amount of time to perform service creation, delivery, test, and deployment. And now that it's a fully automated cloud environment, it's literally the click of a button to deploy these services and to turn up new capabilities. And when you talk about that reduction in time, you're talking about the reduction in carbon footprint and expense and energy to get these services deployed. And that has a significant impact. When you add things like CI/CD, for continuous delivery and continuous integration in the networks, as well as bringing in advanced processing capabilities like the newer low power system on chip and advanced processor designs, as well as GPU and accelerator technologies, there's so much of an investment towards virtualized technology that you've got a tremendous energy savings as you move towards this architecture.
Yeah, good points. And some of these areas I think are often easy to overlook. Jane, you'd like to come in as well?
Yeah, I would say it's become one of the topics to saying it only works well if we are then able to co-host things on the edge, right? Because if I take a radio today and I take the full BTS and I spend in many cases 30 years optimizing on being as optimized as possible, then when we move on to COTS hardware, we of course, if we can't share the workload, I also, from an energy point of view, will not be as efficient. So that it's clear that we get many benefits out of it, but we also have to be clear that until the radio resources itself does not consume, I need to reserve my full compute from the beginning. If I do that, then I'm better off also from an energy perspective on a classic one. So just to put in this this aspect of saying it only works when we truly become cloud native on the radio side, because otherwise we can't co-host, and if we can't co-host applications, we can't share the resources. Then I need as many as I did before, and from an energy point of view, we are not there yet that I'm as energy efficient on a CPU or whatever we use as I am on a super optimized radio processor.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Jane. And Susan, let's come back with this one.
I was going to do that because I think, the combination of Jane and talking about the hardware acceleration, it's about optimizing at every level of the stack, whether that be at the hardware, the platform, the application, but it's also about optimizing that as a totality. I mean, if the application can't tell the hardware that it doesn't need that capabilities or that clock speed, then you're not going to be able to reduce that energy consumption. So, it becomes an ecosystem effort to actually reduce the overall power consumption, but also get the most out of the hardware, so you don't have to spin up another server. So, it's a task that we all need to work on together as an ecosystem.
Yeah, again, the importance of the ecosystem here. Jose.
Yes, elaborating on that, I completely agree. Also, one of the things that the industry is working with the application providers is the consumption also of resources, and that's impact on the energy as well. So, for instance, sometimes when you have a sensor that talks to the network and sends messages every 10 milliseconds, the questions to the deployer of that application is it necessary to have an updated temperature every 10 milliseconds? Maybe the answer is no. How about if you consider that update of temperature could be done every 5 seconds or even 5 minutes? And that will reduce enormously the workload of the network, the consumption of the radio, and also the optimization of the network.
Great, thanks very much for that. A great question as well from our viewer. It generated a lot of responses. Ray, why don't we pop back over to you for our next viewer question?
Okay, great. Thanks, Guy. So Paul at Wind River, we're coming to you and we're going to ask you the same question we've asked everybody. What got you into telecoms? How did you get your foot on the ladder in this industry?
Yes, so I went to university for electrical engineering and really had a a passion for that space all the way through high school into college. And my first job coming out of university was working for a telecom equipment manufacturer, producing, and this will date me a bit, but producing T1 and E1 card designs and that sort of thing. So doing a lot of hardware design in that space. And, I just fell in love with the industry. I was surprised at how much advanced technology was happening here, and that continues to today, and climbed through class 5 switching and wireless and on into technology roles. So it's been a great career and a great industry for me.
Excellent. Well, I wish I didn't know what you meant by T1 and E1, but I do. But anyway, let's move on to the audience question now. And this links to a little bit about what we were just talking about. There's a lot of talk about distributed networks and the edge, but isn't this just going to increase all costs, CapEx and OpEx, and increase energy consumption too? So obviously a concern here from the person that's asking this question, that everything is going to go up, all costs, all energy consumption. Can you alleviate those concerns, Paul?
I think so, and the answer is simply certainly not, right? As you've heard from the panel talk through these topics, you've noted that 5G technology itself, which is going to become the dominant access technology at the edge of the network, the distributed edge, is significantly more efficient, and we're pursuing even more efficiency improvements from an energy perspective in that technology. And then the emergence of cloud-based technologies, and the last question that we just talked through, is really the use cases being brought to the edge of the network. And it's really interesting because, obviously in most countries, cellular access is a relatively established business, and there's significant penetration for the subscribers that would join it. And so there's some aspect of that edge modernization that's happening to continue to stay current in that space. But the real motivation for a lot of service providers for doing this is about edge-based applications. You think autonomous vehicles with accident avoidance, you need ultra low latency communications between these things. You need control and access for autonomous drone control and drone delivery, as well as telemedicine. And these kind of modern expectations that the consumer has for these services is what's driving the build of the entire edge network that we're talking about. And bringing in the cloud technology to that space, you have an evolution here that's gone from virtual machine to container and cloud native. And that evolution has produced a tenfold increase in energy efficiency, where used to be with virtual machines or dedicated equipment, there was a tremendous waste of CPU resources, right, on these type of platforms during idle periods for the dedicated single application that ran on that platform. Now, as you move to cloud native, you have an incredible efficiency by compressing the amount of applications that are running on that same platform. And this is enabling the deployment of these edge applications that we've talked about, as well as technologies like MEC, using the exact same infrastructure that's already running vRAN to power the 5G access network. So what you're looking for here is a tremendous reduction in the amount of equipment and energy that's required, even though the applications and technology are increasing going forward. And then, of course, as we talked about, the cloud technology is creating a lot of software automation in this environment. That's reducing the personnel required to maintain the network. That's reducing the truck rolls as you're able to automatically deploy applications to the edge of the network on a virtualized infrastructure, reducing the personnel required for maintenance. And then finally, on top of all of this, bringing in intelligent edge systems with machine learning and artificial intelligence for predictive network outage avoidance and maintenance in these systems, as well as power control. So these new technologies, they're pretty exciting, right? We're talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, software automation, edge-based virtualization, and cloud-native technologies. These are the things that are driving incredible energy efficiencies that are enabling us to grow the applications at the edge while driving down power consumption and maintaining sustainability.
Excellent. And the great news is, all of these things you're talking about there, Paul, they're with us now. They're not just on paper as they might have been 4 or 5 years ago. So I've seen hands up here. I saw Susan, I saw Jane, I see Jose, but we'll come to Susan first and we'll work our way up the stack, as you might say in the software world.
Thanks. Well, I think, tapping into that AI whole conversation, I think becomes really important because, having the ability to do things in real time, tune the workloads and the hardware, being able to spin up a new server or take it down. they're not things that people will be able to do because you just can't manage that many applications or sites. So to Paul's point, having that automation to be able to, create policies on, when to, take down capacity in the network and then spin it up is things that, the industry's been looking at for a couple of years. And, having the ability to now to execute that, I think at the full stack is really going to be a big savings. But I think we talk about the edge of the network, it's like the very edge. But the edge of the network is actually at the enterprise's location. So, what we'll also see is, there's a huge inefficiencies in those on-prem deployments with a lot of those enterprises. And I think that's one of the great things about MEC is that they're able to sort of start to tap into, clouds that allow you to optimize beyond that sort of individual enterprise and start to do that at a much broader scope. So, most IT applications, have traditionally had a utilization rate of CPU around about 21%, and we're looking at completely different rates when you start moving into a telecommunications network. So by just increasing, the efficiency of CPU on enterprise sites back into the network will make a huge difference from a power consumption perspective as well.
Great point. Jane. Let's move to
you. So I'm going to go back to my RF side, right? Because one key aspect of this is independent of how we run the baseband and run the software, I still have an RF out there. I can't avoid it. We still are not able to make something very physical like the antennas not behaving like they are. So for us and in Nokia, one of the key aspects is that we around the world have more than 5 million antennas that can be software upgraded to 5G. And just by upgrading them from former technologies to 5G, we also will be able to lower the energy consumption, because 5G, as we discussed in panels and also here, is more, designed more energy efficient than previous technologies. And so while we do this, while we talk about what we can use of the baseband unit side and how we can do this, we need to take the next step with us and think about what can we also do on the RF side. And then the last part, I just want to emphasize, if we move the traffic to 5G, we will become more energy efficient than the previous ones, which also means we need to switch off the old technologies, right? It doesn't help that I add a 5G technology on the radio side if I don't switch the old ones off, because then I'm not doing something good for the energy consumption totally.
Yeah, and that topic of legacy and what to do with the old networks and old services, that cropped up on our live discussion yesterday as well. Jose, to come to you on this.
Yes, I'm going to add 2 or 3 more arguments on CapEx and OpEx saving. And one is, so if I have a customer who is consuming, and that could be an industry or maybe a viewer from home consuming content, for instance, and they have a server nearby, the consumption to go to the server nearby and back, it will be less than if it's the server maybe in the capital of the country, or even if it has to be and collect the content from the US and come back. So this is a lot of saving in fiber, in backhaul systems, in international cables. So that's one of the arguments that I would like to introduce. Second one is, as we move to edge computing, we see the possibility of mobile operators sharing edge computing capabilities, sharing from the principle of sharing a shelter where they can somehow put their equipment and they can share energy consumption, they can share cooling, they can share air condition. That's a saving itself. And if we go a little bit deeper and we consider that they could also share servers, or if we go to the virtualization, if they can share containers, or they can share servers and have different containers, that's efficiency. And that's also a sort of saving by sharing capabilities in edge computing. And the last point is, and we have been applying these in the Netherlands ourselves, we are currently using for edge data centers, our high towers, these high towers of a lot of meters. And the good thing of these towers is that because of the height, the servers can be maintained also cool, and we are applying air cooling. So these kind of systems where you are benefiting from the height of a tower to cool some of the equipment, that could be something also that can be applicable. So if you have a concrete tower and you can split into small floors and put there edge computing data centers, and that those can be shared, that will be a way to save CapEx and OpEx.
Okay, great insights. Thanks, Jose. I saw, Paul, you wanted to come back in and make a few more comments here.
Yes, I'll do it quickly because I see we've got a great question here that's driven a lot of conversation. I just wanted to follow up the CapEx and OpEx point. It's a really excellent point, and we found that the work that we're doing isn't really so much in the enterprise domain, but really at the very far edge of the network, where when we talk about the vRAN and components like the VDU instance that's running basically directly at the base of a cell tower, for a service provider, the footprint that you require for that infrastructure is hugely impactful to this energy question. If you think about the edge of the network like that, where the 5G VDU exists, there in any major service provider, you can be talking 50,000 to 100,000 sites. And so any savings you make there, and this is why that RF at the edge of the network is such a dominant part of the energy consumption, the volume is extremely high, right? And so if you can come up with a solution that has a lower footprint to run these applications at the edge, it pays off tremendously in sustainability. And I'd also point your readers to our website, where we have a study that actually documents and shows the possibility of savings up to 75% at the edge of the network for using new technologies like the Kubernetes cloud infrastructure that we use for hosting these types of 5G applications. So just wanted to note that as well, because it has a tremendous impact on OpEx and CapEx.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Paul. Great answers. And Miguel, we can't leave you out here. We need the full complement.
Yeah, and this is a really good set of answers. I think the one thing that I was thinking as my colleagues were speaking is, if you think about maybe the one big deliverable of 5G that we haven't talked about yet, like network slicing, kind of puts it all together, right? And so we often think about network slicing only in terms of service enablement, but there is an opportunity for efficiency, right, from an energy consumption and workload placement. That kind of puts all these components that we've been talking about, right? Like, so place the workloads where they belong. Think about services now tailored very specifically to the area where the service is relevant, as opposed to, we've done historically defaulting every service to be in a nationwide type offering, right? And as we segment those services into logical networks, some of them only really make sense in very specific locations, think stadiums or enterprises and smart industry. And so you can kind of rally all these efficiencies to that slice and then reap the benefits on the energy consumption as well.
Okay, excellent point, and a great way to wrap up this question. Really, lots of excellent answers there. Thanks very much. Guy, back over to you, which for what would have been the halftime roundup, but we're way over halftime, I think.
Just a little bit, Ray. But that's absolutely fine, because the discussion has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Before we move on to our next viewer question, and hopefully we do have time for a couple more viewer questions, let me tell you quickly about the series of polls we are running. Every day this week, we are posting a new poll question related to the theme of the day. Each question is a simple multiple choice, 5 answers basically ranging from I agree to I disagree. Only takes a few seconds, so please click on your choice of answer and have your say. The poll is right here on the website. Today's question is, despite the sustainability agenda, will the shift to 5G architectures only increase the aggregate energy consumption of telcos? And you can see the current split of opinions right here. And it's early days on this poll, but our early polling highlights probably an element of skepticism, an element of doubt about the ability to lower the overall energy consumption. Possibly, but we're going to keep this poll running a lot longer, so we'll get more votes. Make sure your opinion is counted. Go ahead and click on the poll. Right, back to our Q&A, and looking at the clock in the studio, we have about 5 or so minutes left, so let's get a couple of questions in if we can. Over to you then, Ray, for our next audience question.
Okay, thank you, Guy. Right, our next viewer question, and this is based. This comes from one of the panel discussions, roundtable discussions from today. Does the panel have any examples of telcos being more good or better, as was said during the sustainability roundtable earlier today, towards supporting the sustainability agenda? So any examples in the telecom industry of advancements in sustainability? Does anybody want to come in with any examples there? Susan, do you want to come in there?
I think, yeah, sure. I think that, we've touched on a number already, particularly in relation to sort of the wind and solar power aspects of it. But I also think Jane touched on some of a really nice case. In some of the data centers, we're starting to see a lot of that heat being used in innovative ways, whether that be for sort of local community heating and these sorts of things. But I know that there was a number of cases, certainly in Africa, where they were also using some of the solar power for not just the cell towers and that, but also for pump, in relation to water. So I think there's a lot of these initiatives that are going on. But one of the things I would recommend people, if they're really interested in, most of the telcos and most of the NEPs all have a section in their annual reports about, some of the initiatives that they're taking. And they're really some very inspirational stories about, not just looking at what are we doing from a network in terms of sustainability there, but there's been many initiatives over the years, for example, taking the lead out of the solder on hardware production, the recycling of all the hardware. So I think it's a really broad topic, and it sort of depends on how wide you want to take it. But, it's one of the things I love about working in the telecommunications industry is just how socially aware, the bulk of the industry is.
Yeah, and we're certainly noticing more of that, and this is why we have a whole sustainability channel on Telecom TV. Jane, I saw your hand up there, and then we'll come to you.
Yeah, I just want to add a bit, because it's true about the liquid cooling, and I think we can have a whole section on that as well, but that's definitely interesting. But we should also not forget, when we talk about what Telecom is doing, what do we enable? Because a lot of the discussions, whether it's IoT or industrial IoT, somebody said to me the other day, we're also switching off Wi-Fi, which is not bad, not very good for the energy consumption. So where can we use Telecom in a positive way with the solution that's provided? And I want to give one example when we come back to the renewable energy. The more renewable energy we have, the better control we also need of utility grids. And this is actually why we see Telecom becoming more and more relevant also within the energy sector itself. So how can we use Telecom products and services and be the carrier of some of the things that is needed for actually providing us with the renewable energy, whether it's for solar panel or wind energy? We have, from a Nokia perspective, good case examples of both, right? We're really saying, what is a smart grid? How do we manage wind farms? Where do we ensure that the solar panels is managed correctly throughout the grids? So I think we also need to think from a telecom perspective on the bigger picture. What do we enable, and not only where do we consume as an industry?
Great, excellent. Yeah, great points there. And Jose, I'm going to come to you, and then I'm going to go direct to Guy to squeeze one last question in, because we're going to break the rules today and go over time. But Jose.
Perfect. So I wanted to raise that the industry is very aware of the commitment from the United Nations to avoid emissions and avoid the increase of the temperature of the planet in 2 degrees by 2030. And their industry partners, and between them, we found ourselves that we have committed to reach not only that target, but decrease only in up to 1.5 degrees. And that's a commitment from the entire industry. And the second point that I wanted to raise is that also what is happening is that most of the mobile operators and ourselves are committed to reduce the carbon footprint in a percentage of 50%, 100% in 2030, 2040. And I think that there is a general commitment from the industry to reduce to 100% soon, depending on who you talk to. It will be in one date or the other, but the industry is committed to reduce the carbon footprint in 100% in the next few decades.
Excellent. Great point, Jose. Thanks very much. So, Guy, have we got time for one more question?
Oh, I think we have. Let's squeeze this one in. Here's the next viewer question we've got in. It's the last one of today. Is one of the problems here the fact that energy use is not tracked by regulators, that there is no compulsion to share data, therefore there's no accountability, there's no global index on energy usage in our industry? Anybody got any quick thoughts on that? Yeah, Paul, please.
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, what I would say is that there is a commercial aspect of this that drives the positive effects that we're looking for, right? The cost, the OpEx cost, as was quoted, 20 to 40% of a service provider's running cost for operating a network is purely power, right? And so there's a tremendous amount of effort and energy being placed into reducing that. And this has nothing to do with regulatory tracking or tax or anything like that, trying to incentivize it. The service providers are naturally motivated to reduce this. And in fact, I can certify as a vendor, participating in the networks, that we are under continuous pressure to reduce the footprint that our software takes, to reduce the cycles that it takes, to reduce the number of nodes that we take. And this is all driven from concerns about energy and sustainability, and of course the cost to run that network. So you have this natural connection between the cost of network operation and things that drive sustainability forward and energy consumption down, without necessarily requiring a regulatory structure in place. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Well, let's quickly hear also from Jane.
Yeah, so I was going to say that one thing is accountability, but I think actually I think Susan said it earlier, the whole industry is committed. From a Nokia perspective, we went out a week ago and said, yes, we are going to cut our emissions in half from 20 or reduce it by 50% from 19 to 30. And I think the whole industry is committed to this and is accountable for it. So I'm not sure we need a regulatory guideline to saying X, Y, or Z, because we're there and we're on the right track for doing this. So I think the commitment is there despite no regulatory framework, which, by the way, global regulatory frameworks are always difficult to navigate in with, right? So I prefer that we do the commitment part.
Well, you're absolutely right there. Yeah. Susan.
Just maybe one other comment. I mean, at the end of the day, these companies are made up by people that are, technologists that are, looking at how do we do things in a better way. So I don't know that, we as individuals, not only just companies, care about, what we're putting out into the market. We care as consumers that, the things that we purchase are produced in an ethical way. So I think it's very difficult to do it on a global level from a regulatory perspective. And I think in some cases it will actually lower the bar. So I think, given that, we're all very passionate in this industry about doing things in a better way, that we will get there, simply because as consumers, we demand better. And as individuals, we want to give our best, not only to our companies, but also to our future.
Thank you, Susan. And Jose, you want to add your comments as well?
Yes, very quick. We do have sustainability indexes in the telecom sector. And in fact, there is an interesting, healthy competition to be leaders on these sustainability indices. And I'm pretty sure that most of the corporate sustainability teams are eager to be named at the top of these indexes. So the reality is that the sector is tracking and measuring the sustainability.
That's a good point, actually. We do hear an awful lot. from various telcos, all claiming to be leading this area and being top of their own sort of internal charts here. Any more comments before we wrap this one up, or are we all done? I think we could all be done then, Ray. So thank you all very much. We are indeed out of time. It's the end of our after show for today. Thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us for this live show, and to our audience for sending in their questions. We'll be back tomorrow with another live after show programme. In the meantime, Ray and I are off for a shot of caffeine as we prepare for the final day of this year's World Forum.
Well, Guy, I was thinking about having a coffee, but all this talk of liquid cooling has made me think what's sitting in my fridge and waiting for me at the end of this programme. But if you haven't already watched our 2 roundtables from today, then they are available now on demand on TelecomTV, along with all our exclusive interviews.
Liquid cooling, I like that. Tomorrow is the last day of this year's DSP Leaders World Forum, and we've got a great lineup of programmes for you. The theme is DSP revenue streams, and we have a further 2 roundtable discussions followed by our live Q&A show. We really hope to see you then. For now though, thank you for watching and goodbye.
The after show was recorded in front of a live online audience.